Hello and welcome to the Brockton Bay Chronicles. My name's Keith and I'm here with my co-host and parahuman newbie, Andy. Andy, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Keith. Trying to not let my head spin around with this latest section we're going through. We'll be reviewing Arc 11, Infestation, chapters 6 through 8, and Interlude A. And this week, we have a couple of questions to answer.
Yes, we've got two questions to answer, and one of them I think I'll save for the end after we've finished our review. But from YouTube this week, we have a question from new subscriber Paranith. I hope I'm saying that correct, and thank you for joining us, Paranith. And they share the following. I don't really get what you have against dragons' biotechnology. I can see it as creepy or gross, but not as morally wrong. Would you view cloning a heart for transplant or making lab-grown meat as immoral? I don't think most people would view being biological as automatically giving something moral worth, as shown by bacteria and plants. So I don't see why a biocomputer with a mind far less complex and able to feel pain than an animal would be a moral issue. Well, Paranith, for me, just being a sci-fi fan and a layman as far as computer technology is concerned, I think looking at this, it was just a visceral reaction based on how it was written in the story. First, Skitter comes across this thing inside of one of the dragon's suits as it's self-destructing, and then later in the dragon interlude, we find out what they're all about. And I think the writing there was my visceral reaction was a response to the good writing. The second thing that I might point to, for me, just as a sci-fi fan, I think it's the human developed versus the AI developed aspect of it. Now, this may be kind of a cop out. I'm not sure if you will feel that's the case. But any technology developed by human beings in this field, I think we would feel less apt to have problems with versus the giant fear that we would have of AI crossing a bridge too far. Even though these things that are these agents, I think that Dragon calls them, controlling her suits, aren't human by any stretch. I think as a layman, the idea of an AI getting that far is probably what stirs that reaction in me. Andy, what do you think? You're the computer professional.
I think you make a lot of great points there. And Wildbow implies that Dragon knows that a lot of people would be put off by these agents. And this is a standard ethical or moral dilemma that goes through computer science, artificial intelligence, and science fiction. You know, the Blade Runner story, originally the title from Philip K. Dick's novel, Do Androids Dream of Electronic Sheep? And
Right.
The thought behind that title is that when do created androids or agents get far enough along in kind of the evolutionary sense that they are indistinguishable from human? When do they maybe get a soul,
Mm-hmm.
to put it in a metaphysical term? And so that's one side of this issue that becomes moral, and it's different. I mean, lots of folks believe, that animals have more properties than we know, more attributes than we know, but humans are set apart in a number of ways, and so anything that gets close to a human can cause issues. So that's one side of this. The other side is what Keith said, and that is that an AI by its very nature is not constrained by the typical taboos or the kind of things that a human would have, that's maybe subconscious or unconscious. things that we just know are not cool. And the fact that the AI is operating trillions, quadrillions of times faster processing than we are lets them go through an unimaginable number of scenarios and weigh things in manners that we aren't able to. And so they may come to the conclusion, as happened in, iRobot and Terminator, they may come to the conclusion that what they create is better than human anyway. And so why have humans? And
Yes.
so that's kind of the other side of this, is that we can't, if something is advanced enough that they can create this thing growing in a vat or whatever, then they're beyond what we can comprehend. And we might not be able to know what they're going to come up with and what path they might go down before it's too late. And so that's the other side of this coin, something to be concerned about.
Good answer, buddy. And thank you, Paranith, for both for becoming a subscriber to our channel and posing such a fascinating question. Wildbow throughout this story really makes you think, and those are the kinds of stories that I really enjoy, which is part of the reason I interested my good buddy Andy in this thing. So, and with that, like I said, we'll get to our second question after our review. So let's dive into our point by point discussion now. And we pick up Arc 11, Chapter 6, and it's right where we left off last week, where our last episode, where Taylor, Lisa, and her soldiers are trying to rescue Bryce. Bryce is there with his new girlfriend. Skidmark has created this ring with his power and has an untold number of individuals stuck in the middle of it, engaging in combat. And it's just, I think I used the word Mad Max-esque last episode, and I see nothing going on here that would change my description. Andy, what do you think of that?
Definitely has that Thunderdome vibe. Two walk in, one walks out kind of thing, except here we have the last five standing that are going to get this reward. So, and as things progress, we see that people try to strategize or come up with tactics.
Mm-hmm.
All sorts of bizarre things come up where it goes from the typical of, all right, you and I are going to fight back to back kind of thing, or this group will pair up, or they see somebody turn on somebody else, then everybody turns on that person, to the thing where they're using the power, the attributes of the ring to send projectiles at other parts of the ring that they can't get to, which is it's necessity is the mother of invention, right? So, and then as they thought would happen, because this is just such a violent and near-death experience kind of thing, we have a trigger event happen.
Yeah, and the power that comes from that is something to behold. As they're there, they've got Bryce and Lisa and Taylor are just trying to decide what they're going to do. They're going to leave his girlfriend or what. I like this description here of Skidmark, and he's maniacally standing on the railing, looking at this thing. It says Skidmark gripped the railing as he hunched over it, grinning a smile with teeth that seemed to be every color but white. His eyes were almost glittering as he watched the chaos he set in motion. This guy's a maniac. He has taken a certain percentage of these people in the merchants were just desperate people on the lowest rungs of society. Some may have been started out as normal human beings who descended into this chaos, and he's tapped into this raw primal animal that is in each of us, and he's standing over it, marveling at what he's created.
It's very creepy for sure, and I think you hit the nail on the head that he's gone after these very vulnerable people, and he's either in some cases capitalize on vulnerability that's there, or found ways to create vulnerability. And so he's, recruiting soldiers, so to speak, either, organically once he finds, or ones that he's creating. And then the people that think they're all joining this community, so to speak, albeit a dysfunctional community, all of a sudden are, set upon each other, all to try to weed out the weak and make the strong even stronger. And he's just getting off on it. So it's I think maniacal is a great term for it. Yeah.
Wildbow does a fantastic job laying out the chaos that's going on in here. At one point, the girl that Bryce is with spots her mom and her companion. Later on, we find out that these were two of the individuals that attacked the church that Bryce and his sister Sierra were staying at. The girl runs off. Bryce breaks free of one of Soldier's grips and chases after her. And after a bit of bad luck, they end up contacting the perimeter of Skid Mark's arena and getting shot into the middle of it with this girl's mom and her companion, and to which Skitter and Lisa are just kind of left standing there going, what do we do now?
Now, I'm trying to recall, when did Taylor and Lisa and all the parahumans kind of get disabled? Was it when Scrub triggered?
That's correct.
Okay. So yeah, they go into the ring there, and Scrub triggers, and then at the story, frankly, for me, got a little hard to follow. I wasn't sure what was happening.
Yes.
It took some rereading for me.
You're not alone there. So Bryce and his girl get pulled into the ring. They decide to hold their ground. Taylor and company decide to hold their ground to try to see what happens after the fighting ends. They're being assaulted by other members of the merchant. And at one point, this big guy is approaching Taylor. And then all of a sudden, she finds herself somewhere else. What do you have any specific thoughts about this whole vision she had?
So I'm reading a story right now. It's about gambling in Las Vegas. It's a science fiction set in the current time.
Mm-hmm.
And it touches on the tarot, how the modern card deck was derived from the tarot deck, and then how the tarot tried to capture what Jung called the archetypes. And so at times during the story, the main character will have a very similar episode to this, where all of a sudden he feels totally insignificant, surrounded by these beings that are immense and unimaginable and have, some impact on what's going on, but he's not sure what it is. And his puny mind, so to speak, is trying to understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what this reminded me of, was that the parahumans they've all been mutated by something.
Mm-hmm.
And that when this trigger event happened in this particular environment, for some reason, the curtain got pulled back a little bit, and it was like their DNA acted as antenna and started receiving these signals from this metaverse, if you will.
Fascinating.
Not the one that we have now that somebody's trying to create, but what we used to call the metaverse, which is forces and creatures, entities that are beyond what we understand.
So see these. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What was your question?
So you see these creatures as just existing in that metaverse, as the phrase we'll go with.
Yeah. So another series that was similar to this was by an author named Julian May.
Mm-hmm.
And it talked about people on Earth getting higher mental powers, telekinesis or being able to read thoughts and that kind of thing. And when they elevated that to that level, then beings that had been at that level around the galaxy then welcomed Earth into what was called the galactic milieu. And so then there's all these interactions on different levels, and it turns out that these other beings had been around for untold periods of time and had shaped things and kind of in some cases prodded things along. So it's almost like these things that the parahumans are glimpsing have said, all right, well, maybe the folks on Earth are ready to try some of these superpowers. Let's start, mutating them, experimenting on them, and see what happens.
Okay. Are you willing to make that kind of a prediction, or are you just kind of making that an observation of the data as you see it at this moment?
I'll go with preliminary prediction. I'm not going to go full on with it yet, but
sure.
it's like I said, it's resonating with some other stuff I've read. And
Uh-huh.
it would kind of, I've been trying to figure out where did this come from, and it kind of some pieces kind of seem to fit together so far. So yeah, I'll go with a prediction. Sure, why not?
Okay, so these beings are somehow influencing via their granting of abilities to humans, or somehow influencing things on Earth.
Correct.
Okay, cool. All right.
And before we move on,
Yeah.
the other book I'm reading is called Last Call, and it's
Mhm.
by Tim Powers, and he is an amazing writer. He writes some really great stuff, so highly recommend him as well.
Well, add that to my list. Awesome. Thank you, sir. Taylor has her vision and comes back to herself and is nauseous and has trouble. The memory slowly begins to recede from her. Charlotte and the soldiers working for Tattletale are trying to hold a line defending him while the two girls are out. Charlotte, that's this young lady's name. We find out she's the one who, the name of the girl who Taylor went to school with. Charlotte begins to put two and two together. She realizes something's up. She sees the people on the stage where Skidmark are. They're all passed out, and she looks down at Taylor and over at Lisa, and wheels begin to turn in her mind.
Yeah, the pieces start falling in place for her as well. And I thought it was great the way Taylor figured out that it was almost like a double exposed image when she had her eyes open.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
she closed her eyes and used her bugs as
Mm-hmm.
her sensory input and was able to keep
Her swarm
fighting. And
sense.
yeah, exactly. And so that was pretty neat because Lisa, and it makes sense. Lisa's power is all about trying to figure things out. So this is kind of like, back in our old days when our data connection to the school computer was 24 baud, trying to put a gigabit line in there and just the computer trying to figure it out, all this
Sure.
flood of information. And so Lisa is her brain is just on overdrive trying to do this. And so she's much more impacted than Taylor, but she also doesn't have this kind of secondary sense array, if you will, that Taylor does. And she clicks onto that right away and is able to kind of get back up and running quicker than Lisa.
Yes, Taylor taps into her swarm sense. I really like that. Again, it's another one of these very cool things that Wildbow does. These abilities that he sets up for us with these characters, as you said, closing her eyes, reaching out and getting her swarm sense, and it's second, almost like second sight for her. Meanwhile, as you said, Lisa, poor Lisa, she's still down and out mentally, and we have this from her as she's trying to recover. She says, "They're like viruses," she said. Her voice was thin as if she were talking to herself, and babies and gods. all at the same time. So she's her power is trying to make sense of this massive input of information that's been dumped on her.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's one of those things where if you read any kind of mystical writings, you get this sense that people are try to use our language to capture ideas that really don't fit into our language.
Hmm.
Like the Holy Trinity in the Christian faith. It's like, well, how can one be three?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make sense. Or read any of the different mythos, and
Mm-hmm.
like in the old D&D gods and demigods book, and they talk about things having four heads or something, or four faces, and it's like they were trying to capture an idea that our language doesn't really capture very well. So, because virus, God, baby, those don't really connect in any way,
Yeah.
but you get the sense of something that can slip in without you knowing about it, something that doesn't really understand what it's doing to its subjects, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and then something that's all powerful and able to do what it wants, even though it doesn't really understand what it's doing or grasp the impact. So
Very, very cool scenario that he set up here.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So after this boy triggers and Taylor and company are trying to gather themselves up, Skidmark calls him to the stage and christens him Scrub. The kid, poor confused kid, he just doesn't know what's happened to him. His powers firing off randomly, eliminating, erasing chunks of flesh from people. This is one of those instances where we find that a power that works on humans doesn't work on inanimate objects. I think we've had that conversation in previous episodes. So this guy, until he begins to manage his power a little bit, is just it's randomly firing off and it's taking out chunks of people's bodies, which is just got to be a wholly ugly scene.
Yeah.
As we move on into chapter 7, Faultline and her crew arrive. What did you think of them dropping in from out of nowhere in this chaos?
Very unexpected. And again, Wildbow does a good job of kind of disguising what's happening. And, at first I wasn't sure if this was more of what all the parahumans had experienced during the trigger event, if it was just kind of aftershocks or what was going on. But then it kind of gets explained and it's like, oh, okay, I see. There's more people showing up to the party. It's kind of like, we'll let this group fight that group, or let this group fight among themselves and get all distracted, and then we'll swoop in and get what we want.
Yes, they weren't just showing up to enjoy the festivities. Faultline's crew, they had a mission, and it turned out that they were after that briefcase full of vials. And to back up slightly into chapter 6, Skidmark, after christening that kid Scrub, asked him who he wanted to have the contents of the vial. That was part of the competition. The last people standing would get a chance to drink from one of these vials of superpower elixir, as it were. At first, he asked if he can give it to two friends, and Skidmark says, "No, don't do that. You don't want to do that. You got to pick one." He picks one, and quite naturally, the other one is jealous. And I mean, that's humans being humans. Faultline and her team make a play for the vials, and they have a new person on their squad, a redheaded girl who seems to be quite adept at moving in and out of danger.
Yeah, I had trouble figuring out who that was until later on in the story where it's kind of divulged, but it's interesting and it makes sense. They touched on this person
Mm-hmm.
in an earlier interlude, so but I didn't think of how that power would manifest. So I didn't put two and two together as I was reading it.
How did you like Labyrinth coming in with her power? I think Labyrinth is I want to say she's a Shaker 12. I think that's her classification and ranking. And she created this massive maze inside the mall. How'd you like that?
That was amazing. It kind of reminded me of Inception, some of the
Mm-hmm.
scenes from that, where cities are folding on themselves, uh, and it's like something out of a twisted dream or something. The way these faces are coming out and arms and holes opening up, and yeah, you said walls shooting up, things falling down from the ceiling, and it's pretty incredible. It's like the worst haunted house ever or something, but is really well written and very vivid word pictures.
And in the middle of all this, we get, even though she's in her civilian clothes, we once again see Skitter being a battlefield commander, directing the soldiers, Lisa's soldiers, making the decision to go after Bryce, who has been injured by Scrub's power. It turns out that Bryce, his girlfriend, and her mom are dead. Bryce has got part of his hand removed, and the guy they were with has massive damage to his back and is probably going to die. But back to that point about Skitter, being the boss and making the decisions and directing the soldiers to get the mission accomplished, which is what they came there for.
It was great the way Taylor orchestrated things and tried to work things out, and the battle with Skidmark and his minions versus Neuter and the other folks was great.
Mm-hmm.
Gregor, as always, I'm a huge fan of him. So
Yeah, I like him too.
when the way he was described in the battle, I really enjoyed that part of it.
And how about Faultline's power? I mean, we go from, if you remember the interlude where were introduced to the team where she's using trying to break the Manson effect on these
Mm-hmm.
small chunks of wood. We go from that to seeing how powerful she really is in action.
That was pretty amazing. Yeah, she really took out Trainwreck, as I remember, and was just carving her way through most of everything. So that was pretty cool to see as well.
Oh yeah, train wreck. That little conversation that Taylor had with him. Hey, are you working for Coil still? Well, let's just say that if you were working for Coil, maybe it might be kind of cool if you did something about this wall that's trapping us in. And he does.
Yeah. So again, Taylor using whatever resources are available, rolling the dice a little bit, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, and trying to act on intelligence that she has, and it paid off.
Definitely. So Trainwreck was, I guess we call him a spy inside the merchants?
Uh yeah, I would say that's true. Double agent at least, yeah.
Yeah, double agent. Thank you. The team decides they get a hold of Bryce. Brooks works on him and bandages up his hand as best they can. And then we get this rather fateful decision that Taylor has to make. Thomas is severely injured. The medic says, "Hey, ask her, do you want me to try to fix him? Probably not much I can do." And Taylor makes the decision to not aid this guy at all. Now, this guy was a scumbag, considering what he did to Sierra's friend at the church, as maimed him. And once again, I think Wildbow is getting us to weigh good versus evil or evil versus less evil kind of scenario.
Yeah, this is one of those gray areas that Wildbow leads us into. Thomas was the one who attacked the church with his gang that horribly maimed the one person. Bryce's sister had said, I want these people to feel pain.
Yeah.
And so Taylor was kind of, well, I'm not into inflicting pain, but the damage has already been done, and we've only got so many rolls of the dice to try to get out of here and to meet our objectives. And this is collateral damage, is basically what she decided. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, they turned their back on the guy who's got a giant chunk missing out of him and bleeding out.
Mm-hmm. The merchants are completely and utterly humiliated and defeated by Faultline's crew. Lisa is able to see a way out throughout Labyrinth, raising and collapsing different sections of the floor and making pillars and different walls. Lisa sees an out, and the team makes their way for that exit. And let me back up slightly. Skidmark, seeing that the end is near, he uses his power to shoot the briefcase full of those containers out amongst the people. Papers come out of the briefcase. The vials go flying everywhere. Skitter uses her power to pull some of those papers toward her, and then they beat their hasty retreat. What do you think about this information that they got from this Cauldron organization?
Well, it's definitely starting to pull back the covers on what might be going on. So that's very interesting. And then, of course, Lisa's powers allow her to kind of stitch things together. You can imagine her running through the different scenarios. All right, is this referring to X or Y or Z? Okay, yeah, let's try this path and connect it here. Do those make sense? And so it starts to connect. And then when Neuter shows up, then things really start to fall into place.
Yeah, let's back up. Part of Faultline's discussion with Gregor back in their interlude was her promise to investigate them being Case 53s and try to discover their origins. And we also was in that same interlude where they discussed the dealer, this person who claimed to be able to sell powers. Was that same interlude? I can't remember for sure.
I think so. Yeah, that sounds right. And that's also where they mentioned Shamrock.
Yes, exactly. That she was the first one who had the marking of a Case 53, but had no physical malformities.
Right.
So Neuter comes in from the ceiling when the team had stopped after making their break outside the mall. The team had stopped to gather themselves and fix up Bryce just a little bit better, bandage him. And that's where Lisa and Taylor were looking at the paperwork. And these guys they're standing and looking around for danger. And Neuter comes in from the top of the ceiling or something like that. And that's where where she identifies herself, and they give the papers back to Neuter to avoid a fight. But I mean, it's tattletale. She's already memorized this stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure she's got a whole draft of a document created in her head.
Yeah.
That's starting to hang together. So giving it away is not too bad. Although she does ask for a copy, and Neuter seems maybe open to that. It's hard to say. But yeah, the whole death from above thing. It's that happens so often in movies, but we still don't tend to look up. We don't expect that. That's pretty neat entrance by Neuter, and Taylor covers one of the pages with bugs. The last piece falls into place for Charlotte.
This poor girl.
Yeah. Wow. I can't imagine what she's gone through. She's about to be a side of beef basically in a meat market, and then she's rescued, but the rescuer turns out to be a supervillain. And so I was like, oh my gosh, what else can go wrong today? As tags in my car expired or something. It's just
jeez, yeah.
It's just so bad. So
her mind is blowing. as you said, Lisa offers her services in exchange for information to Faultline's crew. And Neuter says, "Hey, well, I'll tell her, but she doesn't like you." And Lisa's like, "That's all right. Well, I don't like her either, but she's not stupid, and maybe we can come to a mutually beneficial agreement." So the team heads off to go get themselves get Bryce looked after, and that moves us on into chapter 8, and we're back at Dr. Q's office, the guy who's in Coyle's employ, and they are there to get everyone healed up. Bryce get his hand looked at, get Skitter's injuries looked at, and anyone else who has any bumps and bruises. And that's where they have some pretty serious conversations.
I thought Wildbow handled this part really well. This is one of those standard things that you run into with in different stories, where somebody, oh, my secret identity now. But it's also something that happens a lot in like role-playing games where you come across some NPC that, gets caught up in the action, and you can't really afford to let them go out and talk about your plans
Mm-hmm.
because somebody else is going to hear about it. It's going to interrupt your attack on the castle or trying to rob the dragon's lair or whatever. And so then it's kind of like, all right, well, let's do an alignment check. What's going to happen here? And so, but I thought Wildbow handled it really well,
Mm-hmm.
and by extension, Taylor did. Giving different options, thinking on her feet, and then Lisa jumps in as well and offers some assistance on it. So it was pretty cool the way they worked it all out.
Yes, Taylor, while she's waiting to get treated, she begins to talk with poor Charlotte. Charlotte just wants to go home. She's, "Hey, I promise, I didn't see anything. Just, you can let me go. I won't say nothing." And that's where Taylor begins to try to assess the situation with her, try to come up with a remedy. Sierra shows up to come see her brother. They had sent some soldiers to go get her, and that was a pretty, I think that goes to what you were thinking about, how mentioning how Taylor handled this with Lisa. It was a good scenario. Lisa was right, of course. Bryce was going to try to run away. His life had been turned upside down. The idea of trying to turn him into some kind of prisoner for quote unquote his own good just wasn't going to work.
Well, it might have worked if there wasn't anything else going on, but everybody's trying to establish their territories. They're trying to clean up the mess. They're trying to get things, infrastructure running again, and that kind of thing. And so nobody's got time to kind of babysit and reintegrate Bryce into society, so to speak. So it's kind of like, well, he wants to be part of a group and be kind of a foot soldier. So let's try to piggyback on that.
Yeah, let's play into that. And that ends up being a good scenario. The way that it's presented, anyway, the best possible scenario, I guess.
Yeah.
Have him go work for Lisa. He's gonna be around these particular soldiers, the well-heeled professionals in among Lisa's group. So they'll have a chance to instill some discipline in him, and she can go to work for Taylor. And they came up with an arrangement that would allow her to maintain contact with her brother, and it's going to work out as best as it can for their family. Charlotte, having seen all this, decides to go to work for Taylor. I did think that was an effective way to set that story up. You begin with Charlotte being scared and Taylor not knowing what to do. Paused long enough for her to go deal with Sierra and Bryce, and thereby have Charlotte witness this and see that Skitter is not a maniacal villain who's looking to for lack of a better phrase, rape and pillage and steal from everybody.
I think the fact that Taylor and Charlotte had been in school together, there was a foundation there, even though there was chaos swirling all around Brockton Bay, you still had, you've got that mental image, just like when you go back for a high school reunion or something, and you're
Sure.
like, oh, I remember you were that guy that had the 4-inch thick glasses or whatever, and now they're wearing
Hmm.
contacts. And so I think, even though Charlotte and Taylor both, all these folks have grown up where people are flying around and giant monsters are coming in from the ocean and that kind of thing, I think there's still a level of humanity that Charlotte sees Taylor is just a girl from her school. There's
Yeah.
that connection.
Hmm.
And so even though, all right, now I know she's a villain on top of that, and she did this stuff and this stuff, she's still, I remember her in homeroom. I remember her on the playground, whatever. And so I think that helps her to be able to kind of reconcile and say, all right, well, she can't be a super horrible person. She's not one of the end bringers.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have rescued me in the first place. And so, and then as you said, seeing how she dealt with Sierra and Bryce and trying to reconcile the issues there, I think helped Charlotte as well to accept and at least try it out. And that was another thing that both Taylor and Lisa said were that this is temporary.
Yeah.
They didn't say that, you're in bondage for life, or, I'm going to put this tracking device on you, and if you get without it beyond a certain radius, then too bad for you. And so I think that helps make it more palatable for Charlotte too.
Yeah, and I think throughout this whole situation, yeah, Wildbow does a good job of having Taylor stay true to Taylor.
Mm,
I think that's kind of where you're going with that.
definitely. Yeah. Because that was Taylor's whole thing from the beginning, right? She was not wanting to be out and out evil villain. She wanted to be a heroine. She
Hmm.
wanted to be a crime fighter. And it's just that she connected with some folks that she really became friends with that happened to be criminals. So she's definitely not your typical villain, and she's got her own moral compass and all the things she's trying to do, and she's able to stick with that. And people usually can kind of sense that kind of thing.
Yeah. So after all these arrangements are made, Sierra's going to stay with Bryce for a little bit while they get him settled, and then going to come over to Taylor's territory. Charlotte and she are going to make their way back to back to her territory. Gru has been holding the fort down in her area while they were on this rescue mission for Bryce, and they get back there, and the two of them have a chance to talk, and we begin to see what hopefully is the opportunity to mend this friendship.
Yeah, that was interesting, and it makes sense, because they're all kind of graduating, if you will. They're not Teen Titans anymore. They're going
Mm-hmm.
to be having territory of their own, and they need to work together. And so they need to try to resolve this in a kind of more of an adult manner. It's not going to work out if they're just feeling awkward all the time. So it is nice that they're trying to patch things back up, and it seems like it'll work.
Yeah. Yes, it does. One of the things they discuss when they first arrive back at the lair, and Gru is kind of shocked that she's already hiring people to work for her, and is like, "Hey, how come you're moving so fast?"
And I think again, that's Taylor being Taylor, and not everybody having those same kind of skills. They're they're all looking at consolidating things in different ways. Some people have a feel for things and some people don't. I think back to, when you and I were in college, you just are a natural people person. You connect with people, you are comfortable, just jumping right in. And I'm much more well, let me stand at the back and see if I can figure out the dynamics and what's going on here. And And then next thing I know, it's been an hour and a half, and I'm still, all right, I think I know what's going on over there. And, just concerned about, well, I might say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. So I'll hold back. And so I think the other folks are more tactical, all right, Gru has his fighting skills that he was teaching folks and that kind of thing. Whereas Taylor tends to be more skilled in a strategic area than they are,
Mm-hmm.
seeing a long game and being able to figure out, all right, in order to do the big plan, I've got to have smaller plans. And all right, here's a first step, and I can start in that direction. So,
Yes, this is all aimed at her ultimate goal of getting Dinah released. And so, as we move toward the end of this chapter, she's coming to kind of a happy place. Things are better, or at least they're on speaking terms with Brian. She's been told by both Brian and Lisa she seems to be making incredible progress. She's hired her first couple of minions. She's established her territory, and kind of thought to herself at one point, this is kind of what I wanted to set out to do when I was going to be a superhero, which was help people. So as we're winding down, it says here, all in all, if I didn't think too hard about it, I could feel cautiously optimistic for the first time in a long time. For the first time in weeks, months, I could feel like everything just might work out. Do you believe that'll happen?
no, I don't. But I think I totally agree with our assessment of it. So, and you bring up two great points. One is that she's got a bigger motivation. She's got that prime driver of trying to secure Dinah's release. And so that's part of what's lit the fire under her, so to speak. And she's probably been racking her brains and pondering it a lot, trying to set up her plans. So the second thing was touched on at a couple different times during this section, but just the merchants, she, as part of her territory establishment, she knew she was going to have to deal with them. And then she worried about, well, were Gru and Alec, were they watching over her territory while she was off on her side mission? But then she kind of realizes at the end that the merchants might be kind of neutralized because of the giant brawl at the mall. So the Thrilla in Manila. And so that would also, I think, make her cautiously optimistic that her biggest concern, a rival type gang, might be severely diminished, and so much less of a threat for her.
Yes, we shall see. We shall see. And we move on to the first of many interludes in this arc, but it's our final chapter that we're going to touch on for this episode. Interlude 11A, and we are once again with Rachel and her new pack of dogs out on patrol. We can acknowledge right off the bat that that Rachel Lint is just a damaged human being. Life was not kind to her even before she got her powers.
She definitely had a hard time. Yeah. And it goes into some details on that.
Let me ask you this.
Like,
do you think that, how to phrase this? Having read this tragic interlude, do you think that makes her story makes her more interesting as opposed to just kind of maybe even someone as average as Taylor, and then they have one bad event and she triggered this girl had it bad her whole life? Does that make her a more interesting character, you think?
Well, I think, I don't know if I'd contrast it to Taylor, but I would contrast it to kind of just a two-dimensional psycho, if you will. And that was kind of how Rachel came across at times, was just that she was kind of, not that far off from Skidmark, that she was just an animal kind of, but this builds out her backstory and makes it much more makes her more of a complex character. That it's not that she's just brain damaged, for want of a better term, but she's, yeah, just been twisted by her life, by her environment, to this place that she's in now, and that the trigger event just kind of, it gave her a lifeline, kind of, and it touches on it as she's interacting with her dogs, that she felt like humanity basically had turned its back on her. And so with her trigger event and her being able to connect with dogs this way, then now she feels like, well, there's a loyalty there that I can feel, and I don't have to worry about what happened with foster families or siblings or whatever. I think this makes her much less two-dimensional.
Yes, she's doing some pretty deep self-reflection. She realizes that she misses the human connection, that she can't understand how Lisa and Taylor and the rest of the team are happier than she is with her dogs, her pack. Am I seeing that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to encapsulate that. It is hard to describe what's going on there. It's an interesting dynamic. It's like people that throw themselves into their job, and they just become expert doctors or expert lawyers and don't really have a human component, a human interaction component other than their jobs. And those folks also then at times are brought up against that. Oh wow, I it would be nice to have human interaction in my life,
Yeah.
And so, but they realize that when I do my job, I feel satisfied with it. It's logical. Things happen the way they're supposed to happen. When I deal with people, I think know what's going to happen, and then it goes down the toilet. So why bother?
Why bother? Yeah.
Almost kind of the Spock mentality. It's just, it's illogical. Feelings are detrimental. They get in the way. So I'll just do what I know works.
Yeah.
But at times, you know, just making that decision doesn't take away the humanity of a person. And so at times that's still going to come up back, that basic human need of companionship, of our own people.
Yeah. She recognizes that something's broken in her life has been so rough. The relationship with her dogs is almost pure, if I'm using that correct in this phrase. She loves them unconditionally. They love her. I'm not going to. We can't ignore the fact that she has done bad things.
Yeah.
She's done criminal things. She's hurt people, as we're shown here in this one instance, where the gentleman who is firing the gun into Angelica. If you remember early on, we attributed a lot of her motivation to the canine psychology enforced upon her by her power from her trigger event. Now we see, as you were alluding to, the depth of the character. There's more to it than that. There's she has been damaged. She's making her way in the world as best she can, but that between the damage she suffered growing up, being in and out of the foster community, and then the trigger event, it's made her. She's got as many layers as an onion, to borrow a phrase.
Good way to phrase it. Yeah, and we all do. It's just that oftentimes in stories that's overlooked, or it's hard to get to it. It's neat the way Wildbow digs into that in these interludes, and we get more of a picture. But yeah, just as all of us need mentors or coaches or role models in order for us to be fully functioning people, or to get more satisfaction out of life, have more of an abundant life. When those things are lacking, then it's very hard to make it through life and to understand what's going on around you. And so you really see that picture painted with Rachel and her background. She doesn't know what family is supposed to be like or companionship. But as you said, with her dogs, it's all unconditional.
Yeah.
And so then you don't have to worry about, well, are they going to show up for me this time? Are they going to back me up? It's a given.
Yeah.
You can't blame her for really distrusting humanity and clinging to her dogs and staying in that kind of pack mentality.
The scene at the building where, for lack of a better word, she tortures that man. That was just brutal.
Mm.
You can't. I mean, we can. Wildbow has shown us this depth of this character. We see the tragedy in her life, but as I said, this right here, this was brutal. From the outside looking in, we can say, at least I think it was unnecessary, but she's trying to make a point. She's trying to claim her territory. She doesn't understand why people don't understand that this is her territory. If you can hear my dogs, then you're in my territory, kind of thing.
Mm. And that makes sense. She doesn't have the social skills to be able to even think about why what's motivating them or why they're not getting it. She's thinking, if these were other dogs, they'd realize my dogs are running in this area. They should stay out of this area.
Exactly.
And then, part of the pack mentality is that the one for all and all for one. And so when one of hers gets attacked and is in dire straits, then she's kind of got to make an example of putting down the threat so that everybody feels like, okay, we know that you're leading us and that you'll take care of threats to us.
Yeah.
From a human standpoint, it seems unnecessarily cruel and, as you said, torture basically. But thinking of it from an animal side, it's like, well, no, this is the way they deal with intruders, and so it's not that far-fetched from that standpoint, I guess.
Glory Girl and Brandish show up. That was surprising. I'm going to presume they heard the commotion, saw what was going on, and the two of them, mother and daughter, advanced to engage Bitch and her dogs. So quite the fight began to take place.
Yeah, it was unexpected, although it does follow the pattern a little bit of what happened to Taylor with one of the capes showing up, and then Taylor picking up the knife and the cape saying, "I'm not going to let you use that." So yeah, the capes are on alert, but they're spread so thin they can't respond to everything. Mm-hmm. But they are trying to monitor things, and they see or hear that this is getting out of control, so they go to investigate, and then they step in because a person is being tortured. So that's something that they do need to try to prevent.
And then the Siberian shows up. In the middle of the fight, Glory Girl and Brandish take off because the Siberian arrives. What did you think of that? That whole scenario, from her arrival to the effort to recruit Bitch.
Wow, this was a stunner. As it plays out, I can see it making sense, but man, the Siberian's a whole new level of creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And Wildbow does a great job of really writing that well, so that just the whispering and the casual manner of violence and damage, and how Siberian's able to get through to Bitch, even though Bitch doesn't want anything to do with her.
Mm-hmm. She presents herself vocally and physically initially in a kind of a submissive fashion, or at least in a non-threatening fashion, as Bitch interprets it. And later, a couple of times, she realizes that she'd better not, it would be wise to not confront the Siberian. This is just kind of this is really well written, and you're terrified at first, and then I was just kind of fascinated by this. What is she doing? Why is she trying to recruit her to the Slaughterhouse Nine? What is bitch going to do?
And we've had little glimpses of this in the past. That the Slaughterhouse Nine were now down to 8 at one point, or 7, because of infighting, because they're all kind of inhuman, they're violent,
yeah,
and so stuff like that's going to happen. And Siberian touches on that they need somebody else to add in, and they're all kind of out recruiting, or some of them are, and Siberian has taken an interest in Rachel, because Rachel is, in a sense, although she has these human feelings and twinges at times, missing camaraderie, she does relate to non-humans a lot better than humans. And so you could see where that would be appealing to the Slaughterhouse Nine, that they like slaughtering people. So somebody who's not into people kind of aligns with them in a certain sense.
Yes, Siberian is making all these very clever appeals to Rachel. At one point, she says, "Maybe you can be happy like this: a dog, collar around your neck, a fenced-in territory. You'll never really understand what they're all talking about. The best you can hope for is a pat on the head when you're good, when you do as you should. Maybe some companionship whenever you're a good girl. Maybe that's what you want, as opposed to what? Being wild, being free, truly free. It's exhilarating," Siberian breathed. So when you realize where she's going, like I said, I began to go, "Oh, this is bad. This is bad."
It's convincing. Yeah. I mean, you could see where this could be appealing to her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Do you want to go out on a limb? Is she going to accept this chance and leave the team and join the Nine? Do you want to guess?
Well, the gift from Siberian, I think, was pretty enticing.
Mm-hmm.
This wolf puppy, and then when bitch tries a little bit of power on the wolf, and it seems to work so much easier, so much better, then it seems like, wow, yeah, this might be too much for Rachel
Enticing.
to turn down, too enticing. Exactly. So if I had to make a prediction, I would say yes, she's going to join them. She's going to join the Slaughterhouse Nine.
Okay.
I think there's just, as Rachel was thinking about Taylor and how Taylor tried to reach out, and then it turned out to be just another nasty human trick, and
Mm-hmm.
another rug pull. It just seems like she's been burned too much, and this was just the perfect catnip, uh, dog nip, to be able to lure Rachel into turning her back forever on humanity.
Okay. To be continued. We will see what we shall see. All right. And that brings us to the end of Interlude 11A. And now, as we're approaching the end of our episode, I want to move on to that second question that we had for this episode. And this one comes to us from YouTube, from regular contributor Daxfer. And Daxfer asks, with the fact that we're going into territory management, in what way would you go about it if you were put in the same into such a situation? Same as Taylor went about it, or something a bit more hands off, or a mix of in between? Me personally, I would probably be pretty hands on, at least initially, getting things set up. It's kind of my coaching style as a head coach for Pop Warner, get everything set up, hands on, and then get people around me who I could trust, give them the instruction, then rely on them. So, and then oversee and manage from a little bit further back while they take care of business. So that's probably how I'd go about things in that scenario. What do you think, Andy?
Well, I think this is touching on what we talked about earlier. I am definitely more of the sit back and analyze type. So I think if it were me, I would have used the insect minions to gather data for quite a bit of time first.
Mm-hmm.
The way they described it at the beginning of Arc 11, where she, put a bug on everybody and try to track things. I think I might have done that for quite a bit longer to try to identify who was trying to be upstanding as much as possible, who were the malcontents, who were the miscreants, and try to really maybe even guide folks. So, you could theoretically infest an area that was bad and try to get the good people to move out and try to, coax them so that you get, say, a core of the good folks and maybe a buffer of empty area, and then the bad folks, and then go out, get some troops from Coil and try to start clearing stuff out.
I see.
So I think I would have done something more like that. But I think, Taylor is an amazing strategist and tactician, and I think what she did worked really well.
Yes, I think for her, it seems to, and we'll see more of that going forward. Obviously, we'll see how effective it was, but it seems to have been a good start, and we shall see. And that brings us toward to the end of our episode. Reminder: Andy gives his overall impressions, and we'll select key character of the arc in our next episode in part 3. And we hope that you'll be joining us for that at that time. So for now, this is it for us. We want to say thanks very much for joining us for part 2 of 3 for our review of Arc 11. And until next time, take care.
Thanks so much for listening. If you're interested in more books about kind of giant forces moving and impacting things, books by A.A. Atanasio, if I'm pronouncing that right, deal with that same kind of thing too. So I think that's a fascinating subject, and I look forward to hearing more about it through the course of reading Worm. Thanks for joining us in this podcast. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we'll hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more in the link down below. Catch you later.